The day of my grandmother's will reading started like any other gray afternoon, but inside me, the air felt heavy, thick, almost electric. I sat in the mahogany-paneled office of her attorney, staring at the brass clock on the wall as the second hand ticked with the kind of authority that makes you feel small. My cousin Daniel lounged 2 seats away, grinning like he'd already won. He had that same smug tilt to his chin he'd carried since we were kids, the look of someone who always assumed the world would roll over for him. My aunt and uncle sat beside him, whispering encouragements as though this was a graduation ceremony, not the aftermath of a funeral. My palms were damp against my jeans. I had no expectations, or at least that's what I told myself. Truth was, I had been closer to my grandmother than anyone else in this family. Every Sunday for years, I'd sat at her kitchen table, listening to her stories, helping her clip roses from her garden, fixing the squeaky hinge on her back gate. She'd been my safe place when the rest of the family made me feel like the quiet, overlooked shadow. So when the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read, I leaned forward, waiting for some recognition, a nod, a line, anything that said she saw me. Instead, the words cut like glass. I leave my home, my savings, my accounts, and all physical possessions to my grandson Daniel. The room shifted. My aunt smiled, Daniel's grin widened, and I felt the floor tilt beneath me. That was everything. The house, the antiques, her little nest egg of savings, gone. Not a mention of me. Not a single item. The lawyer continued, flipping a page. His voice softened, almost cautious. To my other grandchild, I leave only this. He reached into the folder and pulled out a white envelope, sealed, my name handwritten on the front. The air in the room turned sharp. Daniel let out a laugh that sounded too loud for the silence. An envelope? That's it. He smirked. But my eyes were locked on that paper. My grandmother's handwriting. My name. My heart pounded so hard I barely heard the rest. I reached out, and when the lawyer placed it in my hand, it was heavier than I expected. Heavier, somehow, than all the furniture, jewelry, and money Daniel had just inherited. I didn't open it right away. I just stared, my thumb brushing the edge of the seal, my stomach twisting with dread and hope in equal measure. Because if my grandmother left me nothing but words, those words had to matter. I left the office before anyone could say anything. Daniel called after me, something smug about not taking it too hard, but I didn't stop. I pushed past the heavy glass doors, out into the cool air, and only then did I finally look down at the envelope again. My grandmother's handwriting was steady, elegant, the kind she used when she was writing recipes or birthday cards. Seeing it made my chest ache. She had been gone just 2 weeks, and already the world felt emptier without her soft humming in the kitchen, or her way of tilting her head when she listened. I sat on the stone steps outside the law office, turning the envelope over in my hands. My fingers itched to tear it open, but a strange fear rooted me to the spot. What if it was just a goodbye? A few kind words to soften the blow of being excluded from the will? Finally, with a shaky breath, I slid my thumb beneath the flap and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper, folded in thirds. I unfolded it slowly. Her voice came alive in the words. My dear, if you are reading this, then you already know I left everything to Daniel. Do not be angry. It had to be this way. What I leave you cannot be measured in dollars or bricks. It is something only you can carry. Follow the key. I froze. Follow the key. The letter continued. Look inside the old sewing box. The one you once fixed for me when the hinge broke. Beneath the false bottom, you'll find what I've hidden for you. It belongs only to you. Trust yourself, and remember, Family is not always blood, but it is always truth. That was it. No explanation. No warm farewell. Just instructions. Cryptic, urgent, and somehow heavy with meaning. My pulse quickened. The sewing box. I knew exactly which one she meant. It sat on the top shelf of her wardrobe, a battered wooden box with faded roses painted on the lid. I had fixed the hinge for her years ago, and I never thought much about it. Daniel might have walked away with the house, the accounts, and everything else. But suddenly, I had something he didn't. A secret. And a key. The house felt different without her. The roses she used to water were beginning to wilt, and the air inside smelled faintly of dust and old curtains instead of her cinnamon tea. I stood in the doorway with my hand still on the knob, fighting the urge to turn around and leave. Daniel had moved in already, of course. His car sat in the driveway, boxes were stacked in the hallway, and a half-empty pizza box lay on the kitchen counter like a flag staked in new territory. He'd wasted no time claiming what wasn't even cold in the ground. I moved quietly through the familiar rooms, heading straight upstairs. My heart pounded as I passed the portraits on the wall. Sepia photos of my grandmother's parents, a faded picture of her as a girl with braids, and one of the two of us taken just last year in her garden. She was smiling in that picture. So was I. The sewing box was in her bedroom, just where she said it would be. Dust coated the top of the wardrobe, but there it was, small, wooden, with faded painted roses. My throat tightened. As I reached up to take it down, a voice cut through the silence. Well, well. Look who's snooping. I spun around. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirk plastered across his face. What are you doing in my house? He asked, dragging out the word my like it was a blade. It's still Grandma's house, I shot back, gripping the box tighter. He raised an eyebrow. Not anymore. You heard the will. Everything's mine now. Unless you're planning to steal a few trinkets before I change the locks. Heat rose in my chest, but I forced my face to stay calm. I'm not stealing anything. His eyes flicked to the box in my hands. Then what's that? For a split second, I considered telling him the truth. That Grandma had left me a letter, that she had trusted me with something hidden. But instinct screamed against it. Daniel had always been greedy, always taken more than his share. If he thought there was something valuable in this box, he wouldn't stop until he had it. It's just sentimental, I said flatly. Daniel studied me for a moment, then laughed. Take it. What do I care? If you want broken junk, be my guest. He turned and walked away, whistling. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before I exhaled and set the box carefully on the bed. My hands trembled as I searched for the false bottom Grandma mentioned. My fingertips pressed against the wood, sliding along the edges until, click, a small panel shifted loose. Beneath it was a folded piece of parchment tied with twine, and taped to it, a small, rusted key. The key was no bigger than my thumb, its brass worn dull with age, teeth jagged but intact. I turned it over in my hand, heart thudding as though the little thing carried more weight than the entire house downstairs. I untied the twine and unfolded the parchment. My grandmother's handwriting spilled across the page in looping strokes. This key opens a box that I could never let Daniel, or anyone else in this family, find. You will know where to look. You've seen me hide it before, though you may not remember. When you find it, you will finally understand. That was it. No address. No map. Just a riddle. I closed my eyes, trying to think. You've seen me hide it before. My mind raced back through memories of afternoons spent at her house. Her tending roses, stirring soup, shuffling around with that mischievous smile when she said she had a surprise. Then it hit me. The garden shed. When I was 12, I'd caught her kneeling in the shed one afternoon, sliding something into a loose floorboard before shooing me away with a wink. At the time, I thought it was just gardening tools, maybe cash she didn't trust the bank with. I hadn't thought about it in years. My pulse quickened. I stuffed the letter back into my pocket and slipped the key into my fist. But as I reached the bedroom door, Daniel's voice echoed up from downstairs. "Hey," he called, tone sharp this time. "Don't think I don't know you're up to something. Whatever you're hiding, it's not yours to take." My grip on the key tightened. If he suspected anything, he would follow me. If he followed me, he would see where I went. The shed wasn't far, but getting there without Daniel breathing down my neck, that was going to take a risk. I crept to the back stairs, the ones Grandma always used when she didn't want to wake anyone. They led straight down to the kitchen and out to the garden. Each step creaked like a gunshot in the silence. I paused, listening. No sound from Daniel. I slipped out the back door into the twilight. The air smelled of damp soil and wilted roses. The shed loomed at the edge of the yard, its tin roof glinting faintly. I pulled the door open, and the smell of dust and old wood swallowed me. Tools hung on hooks, a cracked window let in the faintest light. My knees hit the dirt floor as I searched for the loose board. And then, there it was. Slightly raised, edges splintered. My hands shook as I wedged my fingers under and pried it up. A small iron lockbox sat hidden beneath. Exactly the right size for the key. My breath caught. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a slow, stubborn click. The lock gave way with a groan, like it hadn't been opened in decades. Dust rose in a thin cloud as I lifted the lid, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Inside, instead of jewels or cash like I half expected, lay a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. They were worn, edges curling, as though they'd been opened and read 100 times before. I pulled the top one free. The handwriting on it wasn't my grandmother's, it was shaky, masculine, unfamiliar. Across the front, in bold strokes, it read, "For Margaret." My grandmother's name. I unfolded the letter carefully. "My dearest Margaret, I wish I had the courage to stand beside you in public, but the world isn't ready. If anyone knew the truth, it would destroy us both. I will always love you, even if I must do so in the shadows. Tell our child. Tell them one day when it is safe." My blood turned to ice. Our child. I rifled through the stack, my fingers trembling. More letters. More confessions of love, apologies, promises to run away that were never fulfilled. Some were signed simply with the initial H. I sat back on my heels, the shed spinning around me. My grandmother had a secret lover? And a child. Which meant, find something. The voice snapped me out of my trance. Daniel stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the dying light. His eyes flicked to the open box at my feet, then to the letter in my hand. I shoved the papers back inside, slamming the lid shut. "It's nothing," I muttered, too fast. Daniel smirked, stepping closer. "Grandma left you crumbs, and you're really going to hoard them like treasure? Come on. What's in the box?" I clutched the lockbox to my chest, my pulse hammering. If Daniel saw the letters, he'd twist them, use them, maybe even destroy them just to keep control of Grandma's estate. And deep down, I knew one thing. These letters weren't meant for him. They were meant for me. Daniel stepped into the shed, his shoes crunching against the dirt floor. His smirk hadn't left, but there was something sharper in his eyes now. Suspicion, hunger. He always had that look when he thought someone else had something he wanted. "Move," he said casually, like it wasn't even a request. I tightened my grip on the lockbox and backed up until my shoulders touched the wooden wall. The weight of the box against my chest felt like the only shield I had. "No." Daniel chuckled, but it was humorless. "You think Grandma would have hidden money in here? Or jewelry? You think she'd trust you with it?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She trusted me. She always did." That was a lie, and we both knew it. Grandma had tolerated him the way you tolerate a storm, because you have no choice. But she loved me. She'd trusted me enough to leave me this mystery. "Back off, Daniel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He cocked his head, amused. "What's in the box?" "Nothing you need to worry about." For a moment we just stared at each other, the silence stretching. Then, quick as a snake, Daniel lunged forward. His hand shot out, grabbing at the box. I jerked sideways, clutching it tighter, but he was stronger. We struggled, dust kicking up as our shoes scraped the floor. "Stop!" I shouted. Daniel snarled. "Give it to me." The lid clattered open in the struggle, and one of the envelopes slipped free, fluttering onto the dirt floor. Daniel froze for half a second, then bent to snatch it up before I could. His eyes scanned the words, and slowly his smug grin melted into confusion. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. I reached out, snatching it from his hand. "It's none of your business." But Daniel's gaze had sharpened again, suspicion curdling into something uglier. "She had secrets, didn't she? And she told you. Not me. That's why she left you this." I shoved the letter back into the box, slammed the lid, and held it close again. "She didn't trust you because you only ever saw her as a wallet. She trusted me because I listened. Because I cared." For the first time, Daniel's face flickered with something other than arrogance. A flash of anger, yes, but also fear. Fear that maybe the grandmother who gave him everything had also left him nothing that mattered. He straightened, brushing dust off his shirt. "Fine. Keep your stupid box. But don't come crying when you realize all she left you was scraps of paper from some dead guy who couldn't even sign his full name." He turned and stalked out, slamming the shed door so hard the window rattled. I stood there in the silence, clutching the box, my breath ragged. My hands shook as I knelt and carefully placed the letters back inside, one by one. When the last one was tucked away, I sat on the dirt floor, heart hammering. My grandmother had carried this secret for decades. A hidden love. A hidden child. A hidden truth that now sat in my lap. The words from the first letter burned in my mind. "Tell our child, one day when it is safe." I swallowed hard. If Grandma was the Margaret in these letters, then who was the child? Her daughter had died young. My mother. Which meant... I pressed my palms against the box, trying to breathe. My grandmother hadn't just left me secrets. She'd left me a question that could rewrite everything I thought I knew about my family. And I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. But I also knew I didn't have a choice anymore. Because secrets like this, once uncovered, don't stay buried. I didn't take the box back into the house. I couldn't. The idea of Daniel prowling the hallway like a wolf, sniffing for whatever bone he could gnaw on, made my skin crawl. Instead, I tucked the lockbox beneath my jacket, slipped through the garden gate, and cut along the alley behind the hedge where the rose thorns snagged at my sleeves like tiny hands trying to keep me from running. I walked. Past the cul-de-sac where we used to ride our bikes. Past the little grocery that still sells those stale butter cookies Grandma liked. I walked until the street names stopped feeling like memories and started feeling like map pins. Only then did I duck into a small park, sit on a cold bench, and set the box on my lap like it might jump and run. The letters smelled faintly of camphor and old paper. I loosened the ribbon and spread them in order by date. The first was from 1969. The latest, 1977. 8 years of ink. 8 years of someone writing to my grandmother as if their words were the only place they were allowed to exist. I read. Slowly at first, then hungrily, like the truth might evaporate if I didn't drink it fast enough. My dearest Margaret, I passed you in the hallway today and could not say your name. The walls have ears. The walls want to keep us in our rooms. I hate them for that. Another. You said the lilacs are blooming. I have not slept properly since. I smell them before I reach your door, and I imagine a life where our door is the same. Tell the child I carry them in my pocket like a charm. Child. The word kept appearing like a stubborn watermark. Sometimes, the child. Sometimes, our child. Once, just a small, aching, how is the baby? I pressed my thumb to that line until the paper went translucent. My mother died when I was 10. A car accident. A truck took the red light and took almost everything else with it. Grandma never really talked about my mom's father. When I asked, she'd say, "Some men are better as mysteries." She'd smile when she said it, but her eyes would go to the window as if the answer might be walking up the path. What if the mystery wasn't a man who left, but a man who never could arrive? I searched for a full name, a clue, anything. But every letter was signed the same, H, sometimes underlined. Once, followed by a small sketch of a lily. I turned that one over 3 times, as if the back might give me the rest of the alphabet. The park lights clicked on with a soft buzz. A dog tugged its owner past my bench and looked at me with that blunt animal curiosity, then sneezed and kept going. I tucked the letters back into the box and took out Grandma's note again, the one that said family is not always blood, but it is always truth. If H was my mother's father, then what did that make me? What did that make the house Daniel was so busy claiming? More importantly, if the truth in these letters was as heavy as it felt, could it shake his inheritance? I'm not naive. Wills are paper. Blood is biology. But there's a third thing people forget about, the kind of truth that moves a room when it's read aloud. I imagined Daniel's face if a lawyer cleared his throat and said, "New information has come to light." He'd choke on his victory. I needed more than letters. I needed something that a court, and our family, couldn't shrug off as romance. I needed a name. I thought of the one person who might know more than she'd ever said. Mrs. Redmond. She'd lived next door to Grandma since the 70s and still wore her hair like the decade never ended. She brought over casseroles when my mom died and sat on our porch for hours like a quiet lighthouse. If anyone had seen the shadows moving in and out of Grandma's life, it was her. I closed the box, slid the ribbon into my pocket, and headed toward Maple Street. Mrs. Redmond answered on the second knock, her glasses perched at the end of her nose, a floral apron dusted with flour. "Well, if it isn't my favorite gardener," she said, then her face softened. "You look like you haven't slept since the funeral." "I haven't slept since the will," I said, and the corner of her mouth twitched with something like understanding. She stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze. I just pulled a pie out. Don't ask me what kind. I won't know till I cut it." Her house smelled like cinnamon and lemon cleaner. I set the lockbox on her kitchen table. She didn't blink at it, which told me 2 things. She'd seen boxes like this before, and surprises didn't surprise her anymore. "I found letters," I said. "From someone who signed H. To Grandma. They're not nothing. Mrs. Redmond slid 2 plates from a cabinet with the efficiency of someone who knows where everything lives. Not nothing is often everything, she said. May I? I nodded and lifted the lid. She didn't reach for the letters. Instead, she peered in like a doctor checking a heartbeat. Your grandmother was a careful woman, she murmured. Careful women keep their hope on paper. Men tend to keep it in their pockets and lose it with their loose change. You knew, I said. It wasn't a question. I suspected, she answered. Then, after a beat, I saw him once. The room went still enough to hear the pie settling. Who? She tapped the corner of the box, then looked up at me over her glasses. A man with a good suit and a bad conscience. He parked 2 streets over and walked the long way. Held his hat in his hands like it might explode if he put it down. He went to the back door. Never the front. We were not very brave people back then. Do you know his name? She hesitated. In that small pause I felt the weight of every year she'd kept a stranger's secret. Not then, she said. Later. Later. Mrs. Redmond sat, folded her hands, and took a breath that sounded like she was opening a dusty book. Your grandmother asked me to fetch a parcel from the post office once. She was ill, and she didn't want anyone else to see it delivered. The return address had an office letterhead from the County Records building. The name on the corner was Harlan. I never told her I noticed. But I saw the way she touched that envelope when I brought it in. Like it was a photograph that might vanish if she blinked. Harlan. The letterhead. County Records. The puzzle pieces clicked so hard I almost laughed. He worked for the county? That's what the paper suggested, she said, then angled her head. You look exactly like your mother when she realized something dangerous and necessary at the same time. If he worked at County Records, there would be a personnel file, I said. A retirement notice. An address. Something. Maybe even, the word caught in my throat, a birth certificate amendment. We sat in the hum of the kitchen lights for a long moment. Mrs. Redmond slid a slice of pie in front of me. Peach. You're thinking about Daniel, she said gently. I'm thinking about Grandma, I answered. About why she left him everything and me a letter. I think she wanted me to choose the truth over the furniture. Mrs. Redmond's eyes shone. She knew you would. I ate 2 bites without tasting them, then wiped my hands and closed the lockbox. I need to go to the records building. It's past 6, she said. Closed. Then I need to go in the morning, I said, and pushed back from the table. If I wait, Daniel will sniff this out and turn it into a bonfire. I have to be there when the doors open. She walked me to the door and pressed a small key into my palm. Spare to your grandmother's back gate, she said. The front lock will be changed by now, if I know the boy. Come by if you need to cut across. I hugged her without planning to. She was surprised for half a second, then patted my back like she had in the days after the accident. Bring me news, she said. Even the bad kind. Especially the bad kind. Outside, the night had settled deep. I tucked the box under my jacket again and kept to the darker side of the street. When I rounded the corner to Grandma's yard to retrieve a few things from my car, I stopped short. Daniel stood under the porch light, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and clipped. Don't care what it costs. If there are safety deposit boxes, I want them drilled. No, she didn't keep anything at the bank? Then look again. She was old-fashioned, but she wasn't stupid. He ended the call and stared at the garden like it had personally offended him. I felt the old anger rise, hot, useless, and forced it back down. Let him hunt for money. I had something richer. Proof. I slept on my couch with a lockbox under my arm, waking every 40 minutes to check that it hadn't vanished like a dream. At 7:58 a.m., I was the first person in line at the county building. At 8:01, I was at the records window, my palms leaving nervous prints on the glass. The clerk was a man in his 50s with a mustache that looked government-issued. His nameplate read P. Alvarez. How can I help you? I'm looking for employment records, I said. A former county employee named Harlan. Likely worked here in the late 70s. Maybe earlier. He frowned. Department. Records, I think, I said. Or at least something with documents. I don't have a last name. Just a first and a suspicion. He tapped the counter thoughtfully, then sighed the sigh of a man who has seen too many suspicious people at 8:01 a.m. We can search archived staff directories by first name and department. It's not fast. I can be patient, I said, and meant, I can try. He slid me a form and a pencil dull as a crayon. I filled it out with shaking letters, slid it back. He disappeared into a door marked staff only, leaving me with nothing but a vending machine and the sound of fluorescent lights buzzing like mosquitoes. 20 minutes later, he returned with a gray binder so heavy it bowed his arms. He set it on the counter and flipped carefully, as if the paper might dissolve. Harlan. Harlan, here. He tapped a line. Harlan Whitaker. Records Supervisor, 1968 to 1980. Transferred to Vital Statistics in 1975. He glanced up. Ring any bells? The name hit me like a wave hitting rock. Not because I knew it, but because it existed. Do you have an address? A forwarding contact? Anything more? Personnel files from that era are in microfilm, he said, then, at my expression, added, it's like a tiny dark room for people who love dust. You'll need to request the reels. I'll take the dust, I said. He led me to a room that smelled like old pennies and winter coats. He loaded a reel, then left me with a pair of headphones and instructions like I was about to operate a submarine. I turned the crank slowly. Lines of tiny type crawled across the viewer. Whitaker, Harlan R. Address, 412 Elmont Avenue, 1971 to 1978. Emergency contact, blank. Notes, transfer approved. Excellent file integrity. Cautious with sensitive materials. Commended 1974-4, discretion under pressure. Discretion under pressure. A man who knew how to keep things where no one could find them. A man who would write letters instead of showing up at the front door. I kept scrolling. Then I stopped. A scanned memo, blurred but legible. To H. Whitaker, Vital Statistics. From County Council. Date, March 3, 1977. Private matter, adoption query. As discussed, per your inquiry regarding sealed birth records and permissible annotations, please be advised. My heart slammed against my ribs. Adoption. Sealed records. Annotations. I copied the memo number and jogged back to the counter. Mr. Alvarez, is there a way to request sealed birth record annotations for deceased individuals? For genealogy. He studied me. Depends who's asking and why. My grandmother died, I said, and my voice went quiet without my permission. I think the man who contacted you about sealed records was my grandfather. There's a look some people give you when they realize your question is the point you were born to reach. He gave me that look, then nodded once. If the mother is deceased and you can show proof, Some metadata can be released. Not the record itself. But enough to know you're not chasing smoke. I slid Grandma's death certificate across the counter with shaking hands. He took it gently, as if it were a living thing. "Give me an hour," he said. I waited in the lobby and watched a woman argue about a parking ticket like it was a referendum on her character. My phone buzzed twice with unknown numbers. I didn't answer. Daniel could stew. 50 minutes later, Mr. Alvarez beckoned me with a small manila folder. He didn't pass it over immediately. He spoke first, carefully. "There is a notation," he said, "on your mother's birth record. It was added in 1977. It does not change the listed father. It cannot. But the annotation is unusual." He slid the page forward. The photocopy was grainy, stamped confidential, addendum. Amended note, non-legal at the request of H. Whitaker, vital statistics. A confidential annotation has been attached to the birth record of mother's name. The annotation states, biological paternity likely differs from recorded paternity. Identity known to the mother and to H. Whitaker. For personal knowledge only. No legal standing. Filed, April 12, 1977. I read it twice. Then a third time, because the shape of the words changed each pass, like a stereogram snapping into a hidden image. Biological paternity likely differs from recorded paternity. Identity known to the mother and to H. Whitaker. My fingers went numb. There it was. Not a love letter. Not a rumor. A bureaucratic ghost saying, "The truth is here. You just can't use it to hurt anyone." My grandmother and Harlan had etched a secret into the very place secrets go to be locked up. They hadn't changed the law. They had preserved the truth. And suddenly I understood why Grandma left Daniel the house and me the letter. Because money was the fight he wanted, and truth was the war she needed me to win, not in court, but in us. Still, a practical part of me flickered back on. If the recorded father on my mother's birth certificate wasn't her biological father, then my claim to Grandma's estate had nothing to do with legal paternity lines anyway. I wasn't trying to disinherit Daniel. I was trying to untangle a knot he didn't even know he was standing on. I looked up at Mr. Alvarez. "Can I get a certified copy of this addendum?" He considered, then nodded. "I can provide a certified transcription of the annotation with the file reference. It won't change a will, but it will change a story." "That's enough," I said, and meant it. By the time I stepped outside, the sky had shifted from flat gray to a tempered blue. I held the folder under my coat like a pilot light. Daniel was leaning against my car. He pushed off the fender when he saw me. No smirk now. Something tighter. "You're very busy for someone who inherited a letter." I kept my face neutral. "Get off my car." He ignored that and looked past me, as if the building itself might confess my sins. "What did you find?" "Nothing you want," I said. He laughed once, harsh. "I want everything." "I know," I said, and heard how tired I sounded. "That's the problem." He took a step closer, lowering his voice so the street wouldn't hear. "You're going to try to contest. Dig up some ancient scandal. Make Grandma look like a liar so you can get a slice." The folder warmed under my arm like it had a pulse. "I'm not contesting anything." "Then why are you digging?" "Because she asked me to," I said. "Because she didn't ask you." He flinched like I'd thrown something. "She left me everything." "No," I said quietly. "She left you the house. She left me the truth. We stared at each other, the air thin between us. He broke first, scoffing, stepping back. You're pathetic. Maybe, I said. But at least I know what I'm holding. He shook his head, disgust curling his lip, then got into his car and peeled away, a childish punctuation mark on a conversation that felt like a crack running down the middle of our family. I stood on the curb for a long minute, breathing. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't used since the funeral. Grandma's attorney. When he answered, his voice was the same calm metronome as before. "This is Mr. Kane." "It's me," I said, giving my name. "I have information. Not to contest. To contextualize." There was a pause. Papers shuffled on his end like a light rain. "Come by at 4, he said. "Bring what you have. And bring your courage." I hung up, slid into my car, and set the lockbox on the passenger seat. The letters inside rustled softly, as if turning in their sleep. On the drive over, a thought uncoiled that I hadn't let myself think yet. If Harlan was my mother's father, he was my grandfather. And if he signed those letters for 8 years, that meant he didn't vanish. He stayed as close as the times would allow. He pushed an annotation into a system built to forget him. He made sure, in the one place he had power, that the truth wouldn't die when he did. I glanced at the box. "I hear you," I whispered to the paper and the ink and the man inside them. "I'm listening." At a red light, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown, you don't know what you're playing with. Leave it alone." I looked into the rearview mirror and saw no one I recognized. The light turned green. I drove. 4 o'clock would come, and with it, a room, a desk, and a decision. I didn't know if what I carried would make the earth move or just my own chest, but either way, it was time. Because family is not always blood, but it is always truth. And the truth was wide awake.